Betsy McCaughey with us now. She's author From Loyalist to Founding Father. She's somewhat of a constitutional scholar in addition to many other things. She's a former lieutenant governor of New York and a health policy expert. Betsy, thanks for being with us again.
Well, you're quite welcome. And actually what I do most of the time is I advocate for patients. 6 years ago, I launched a campaign to stop hospital infections and to protect patients from dangerous drug-resistant bacteria. But this time, I have just finished rereading the House bill, all 1,018 pages of it, and
well, congratulations! You may be the only person in America.
Well, it would be helpful if more members of Congress read it and the companion Kennedy bill, which is substantially shorter. But what hasn't gotten out, everyone is talking about how tax increases will pay for some part of this $1 trillion to $1.6 trillion health bill, but no one's leveling with seniors about how they're going to pay for it, and they're paying for it with a $500 billion cut in Medicare over 10 years. That's more than a 10% cut, Fred, even when the enrollment in Medicare is increasing 30%. So you do the arithmetic, 30% more people, 10% less money.
It's called rationing.
What it's really going to mean is fewer hip replacements, knee replacements, bypass surgeries, angioplasty. Those are the 4 procedures that have enabled seniors to really enjoy life at the end, in the final years of life, rather than being crippled by arthritis, too short of breath to walk, and just deteriorating in a nursing home. That's the way it was 30 years ago, but no more.
Well, what you're beginning to break through, Betsy, because you can't imagine. Well, maybe you can imagine the controversy that you caused the last time you were on our radio show by talking about some of these things. Some of the liberal bloggers went wild. Conservative bloggers joined the issue, and people were shocked and surprised to find out what's in this bill. And what's in this bill cannot be covered up. When the president says that nobody's going to have to make any sacrifice, we're going to bring 45 million new people under coverage, and we're going to appoint a panel to decide Medicare reimbursement rates and other things, and nobody's going to have to do anything any differently, and we'll actually save money. People know that is illogical, and people know that it's false. But it's when you get into this bill is when you can really figure that out, and that's what you've done.
Yes, and in the context of the reduction in benefits, and clearly they will be there. And you've heard the president and his medical advisors talk about how seniors should get less, that they should reconcile themselves to the difficulties of old age, that Americans are too enamored with technology. Well, in the context of all these reductions in the kinds of procedures that really help us overcome some of the maladies of old age, I came across on pages 425 to 430 a new benefit: counseling on how to cut your life short. And I know that I mentioned it last time, but I want to re-emphasize it because we have gotten so many questions about it. And
is that section 1233?
If you start reading on page 425 of the House bill, when you get to page 430, they actually specify that the counseling will include discussions about foregoing antibiotics, foregoing hydration and nutrition. Now, that's pretty extreme. Mm-hmm. And government should just not be intruding in these highly sensitive matters so sensitive that it's hard for families even to come to grips with it. And now we have the government saying that certain doctors and nurse practitioners are going to walk into an elderly patient's room and discuss these things.
The government is doing these things. It's not a matter of whether or not they should have certain information or not have certain information. The government is mandating, requiring your doctor to do this.
Well, and here's what's so troubling about this. The president has surrounded himself with health advisors who really seem to believe, contrary to the evidence, that this is the harshest misconception in the bill, by the way, that living longer is burden society, that people shouldn't be allowed to live so long because it's a burden on society. But the real Medicare data show, Fred, that a patient who dies at 67 spends 3 times as much on care in the last 2 years of life as a patient who lives to 90. So this is a real scapegoat. They're making the elderly into a scapegoat on these health care spending. In fact, health care spending per capita for the elderly population is increasing more slowly than for the rest of the population. And it's because of these miraculous procedures that have become so common now, bypass surgery, angioplasty, and hip and knee replacements, that have enabled us to keep the elderly from becoming disabled. That's what's costly. So when we give elderly people the benefit of these medical procedures, not only are we making their lives better, but we're saving money at the same time. Living to a ripe old age is becoming a good value. Isn't that wonderful?
Don't you find it somewhat ironic that we spend billions of dollars making our health care system and delivery better through innovation and through new procedures and through new devices? And you mentioned, I think, angioplasty, stents, the anticoagulant drugs and things like that. In the 1960s, the chances of dying from a heart attack within a few days was 30 to 40%.
That's right.
Now it's 6%.
That's
so
right.
While we're doing all these wonderful things, we're trying to figure out ways on the other end to they would say, give people options to cut their lives short.
It's striking. And one of the president's chief health advisors, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, he happens to be the brother of the president's chief of staff, highly educated, widely published, but his views are extreme. I was rereading his articles just this weekend, and in one of them he makes the argument that people who have incurable diseases or are irreversibly disabled should not be guaranteed health services. He says, quote, and this is a direct quote, an obvious example is not guaranteeing health services to patients with dementia, close quote. So imagine your spouse develops Parkinson's or Alzheimer's and is told no more health care.
Yeah. As we continue to make progress in that area. Again, I want to emphasize, when the president says that we should be taking the red pill instead of the blue pill, or the blue pill instead of the red pill, or that we should stop paying for this when something like that would be better, what he is saying, I mean, the question is, who's going to make that decision? If we should, who's going to make the decision? And we know what the answer to that is. And the same thing is true here. When you say that the person should not receive this treatment because they're elderly and so forth, who's going to make that decision?
One of the most
it's all the government.
Provisions. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
One of the most frightening provisions in the bill is right after this section on end-of-life counseling, where they talk about, quote, shared decision-making. And, of course, this is why these counseling sessions are required, because if you aren't involved in this session, you won't be sharing in the decision-making. Of course, the question that came to my mind immediately when I read this is, why should the patient and the patient's family be sharing these decisions with anybody else?
Oh, my goodness.
That's page 442 to 443.
Well, let's hope during this recess period that the American people can really understand what's in this bill. And thank you for your help in that regard, Betsy, and thank you for being with us again today.